Your calls right now to speak with Dr. Marie Thouin, a compersion expert, compersion researcher, author of 2 academic studies into compersion and 1 encyclopedia entry. Hey, Dr. Thouin, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
So this term, which is still new to some people, probably 20-ish years old, people bump on it still. Can you define it and give us the origin of the term?
Yeah, totally. So it came from a polyamorous community that was active in San Francisco in the 70s and 80s called Carista. And they were practicing polyfidelity. They were feeling this thing of, empathic joy when their partners would be having fun with someone else and they didn't have a word for it. So they made one up.
You sometimes hear it described as the opposite of jealousy. Do you think that's accurate?
I mean, I would call it the antonym of jealousy because the opposite would almost imply that you can't feel both at the same time, and really you can, and often, people do feel both of these things.
That comes up. People sometimes ask me whether they're disqualified from exploring polyamory or open relationships or experiencing compersion, if they're familiar with the term, because they sometimes feel jealousy. And it's almost as if that internet meme, there are 2 wolves inside you. There's jealousy and compersion inside you, and they're sometimes in contention. It doesn't disqualify you to feel jealousy, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct. That's correct. You oftentimes will feel a lot of different things, and really the dictionary, or actually the encyclopedia definition that I just published, also makes a difference between embodied emotional compersion and also the attitudinal or the more cognitive action-oriented compersion, which then means you can have a compersive attitude while also feeling a bunch of stuff, including jealousy.
How do you label a person who has a compersive attitude? We talk about people who are jealous as that's a jealous person. Would you say a compersive person?
Yeah. I think the word compersive is great because it really qualifies, like, oh yeah, that was a compersive move, or that was a compersive attitude to have in that situation, even if you felt a bunch of different emotions.
Jealous person is a negative, though, usually. We all experience jealousy, but we know what we mean when we describe somebody as jealous. That usually speaks to not positive jealousy, where you sometimes see your partner flirting with somebody else and you're like, I feel jealousy, but like my partner is so hot. And you feel sort of good about the fact that somebody's stirring a little safe, controlled jealousy up in you. When we talk about a jealous person, we mean usually somebody who's controlling, that their jealousy is weaponized against the person that they feel jealous about or feel jealousy for. Compersion, you could be a compersive person, but it's not a negative and it's not a weapon.
Right. I mean, I think it can be used as a trait. In psychology, sometimes we have the trait versus state conversation, and you can talk about a person who's generally compersive or errs on the side of compersion. And then there's people who might feel compersion here and there, as a state.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know if it could be really defining a person as a whole. We're all very complex individuals.
Why does it make me cringe? Do I, like, every time I hear the word compersion, I have to say, it just kind of like, there's something key party about it. There's something 70s about it. It makes me cringe. Do I struggle with internalized polyphobia or something?
Well, I think people oftentimes have a problem with the compersion term because it feels like if you're not compersive, you're not poly enough. Mm-hmm. Or there's like this pressure inherently with that concept of, okay, if you're evolved enough, you're going to feel compersion, and if you're not, you're just going to feel jealous. There's this hierarchy of feelings. Mm-hmm. And that's why, I think it's important to look at it in a more complex light where you don't just feel one thing. Like you're not just a compersive person or just a jealous person.
And it's a feeling that can come and go. And you shouldn't be shamed if you're not feeling particularly compersive. If you're not feeling compersion at some particular moment. Nobody who's in an open or poly relationship should look at their partner and shame them for having feelings that may be complicating or blocking their ability to feel compersion at any given moment.
Yeah. So I think it's important to talk about compersion and, talk about the word because it lets people know that you can feel other things besides jealousy. when you're non-monogamous, which then throws a wrench into the whole system of mononormativity, which is based on the assumption that you can only feel jealousy in those situations.
How often do we walk around feeling what we've been told we're supposed to feel?
All the time. That's how language works.
I tend to think that, I'm in an open relationship. My husband has a boyfriend. I have a boyfriend. When we're being good to each other and taking care of each other and not neglecting each other, me and my husband, and I know he's with his boyfriend or I see him with his boyfriend, I feel happy for him. Like his boyfriend gives him such joy, and I feel able to tap into that joy. But if we're in conflict, yeah, my ability to tap into that compersive shit is pretty much gone. There are moments I don't want him to be happy at all. I want him to be fucking miserable. And if he and I are fighting and he's being happy with his boyfriend, I'm like, yeah, fuck this compersion shit.
Right. It's very contextual. And it can feel like toxic positivity, right? Like when people are like, oh, you should be happy all the time. It's the same thing.
Okay, I have a question from a follower on Twitter. I mentioned I was going to have a compersion expert, author of the Compersion Encyclopedia entry on the show. And he asks, getting turned on when your husband is getting it elsewhere, does that count? So, can compersion intersect, if I can use that word in this context, with cuckolding or hot wifing? Or does it have to be pure and selfless and altruistic? Can there be anything in it for the person who's feeling it in addition to the feeling, like maybe a boner?
Yeah, I mean, compersion can definitely include like having benefits from your partner being with someone else. Like it doesn't have to be the case, but it can definitely include it. And I would call that particular kind of compersion erotic compersion.
Okay, because when I looked up the definition of compersion on your website, the sympathetic joy we feel for somebody else, even when their positive experience does not involve or benefit us directly. If it's turning you on, it's benefiting you.
Yeah, it's not only if it doesn't benefit you. I mean, if it benefits you, it just kind of adds fuel to the fire.
It's compersion plus.
Yeah, it's definitely
compersion platinum, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
And before we get to a couple of questions from callers, another follower on Twitter asked, largest polycule you've ever heard of?
That's kind of a good question, and it depends how you define polycule. If you define polycule as everyone's network.
We should probably define it really quickly for listeners who may not be familiar with the term.
Right. So it's kind of like the network of people who are involved in a poly relationship, and if you include everyone in that network, it can get pretty big. Like if I'm in a triad and everyone in the triad also has a couple of other lovers, it can get pretty big pretty quickly.
One is growing exponentially at such an enormous rate in San Francisco that all of San Francisco is going to be in a single polycule, I believe, in 12 years is the estimate. It's a race between catastrophic climate change and San Francisco succumbing to one single polycule.
Oh my God, I want to be there.
All right, let's take a couple of questions from callers.
Hi, Dan. I'm a recently married 45-year-old lady, married to a wonderful man. It's his third marriage. It's my second. We are the result of a COVID relationship, but we're very close. I think that this is just one of the most mature relationships that I've ever had. We're really sweet, kind, giving to each other. We decided that we wanted to open things up, and we've had like one night stands with a third woman every now and then. Wonderful experiences, no complaints. However, we took things a little further. We met this girl out, and I wasn't interested in her. And he was, and I thought that that was really sexy, that he and this lady had really good energy. Anyway, they communicated, went out on a few dates, and one night he brought her home, and lo and behold, I actually had fun with them. We played together. In the middle of it, though, this lady just kept on saying how much she loved him, and I got uncomfortable. In fact, I was done and they kept on. I didn't make a big stink about it, but after, I thought that I was emotionally prepared to deal with him having such a serious relationship, and I asked him to break it off. I know that this was unfair. I know we hadn't really agreed to it, and it seemed like something I would be okay with, but it ended up that I was just really not ready, and I felt like I just was not in an emotionally available place to deal with him having a girlfriend.
I think this is a common way that people experience polyamory. Polyamory is, the ability to be in a relationship, concurrent, committed, intimate, loving, romantic relationships, where the person that you say I love you to in that way says I love you to someone else in that way also, and you're okay with that. I know so many people who are what I call PUDs, at least at first, poly under duress, where it was traumatic the first time. They realized that the person who was supposed to be in love with them only was in love with somebody else. But eventually, because they were still drawn to polyamory, got there. They got to compersion, but it took them some time and there may have been some bumps in the road. Do you think this caller might be on that road, or do you think this caller can't get there? Can everybody get to compersion? Could she get to a place where she was psyched to hear her husband say I love you to somebody else, or somebody else say I love you in this way to her husband? Or is the fact that she's bumping on this a sign that it ain't for her?
Well, I think it could get there because she said she was not ready for him to have a girlfriend, but, she didn't say, I would never in a million years imagine that it could be okay with me. She just seemed to have been taken by surprise, and she was not, they didn't have the kind of conversations where they said, like, yes, we're opening up not only sexually, but also emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of communication that needs to happen, within herself and with her husband, and wondering, like, is that a road they want to go down? Is that something they want to explore, first of all?
And maybe she quite rightly doesn't feel safe exploring it with somebody, I'm talking about the third here, not the husband, who would blurt this out, who wouldn't have the emotional intelligence, even if they were feeling this, to realize that you're not just going to scream that out during sex. And this is something that you might have to check in with the person you're feeling it about, and also give that person that you're feeling it about some time to check in with their original partner or primary partner, with their spouse, before you start screaming, I love you, I love you, I love you, during a three-way. It speaks to a kind of emotional insensitivity that would make this particular third person the wrong third person to explore this stuff with, potentially.
Right. And also, when I heard this caller say that she got uncomfortable and then she was done and she left and they kept going, I wonder if the husband or the third would have said, like, hey, how are you doing? Like, what do you need right now? They would have included her and checked in on her rather than just kept going. That might have yielded a whole different outcome.
Man, if people could just internalize that, if you're having a three-way and somebody gets up and leaves the room, the three-way is over. As horny as the two people left in the room might still be, you gotta get up and go check on that third person, particularly if you are married to that third person. There may be a reason why this guy has been divorced 3 times already, or twice already, that he didn't, dickful thinking, I understand it, your dick is hard, like sometimes it's getting in between your dick and what your dick wants at a particular moment requires an act of will, but seeing the woman you married get up and leave the room during a three-way, yeah, you get up, you leave the room, you go check with your wife, you take an ice cream break. Doesn't mean you can't circle back to the three-way, but if you stay and then you come and then you check with the person who left the room, there might not be any more three-ways in your future.
Totally. And to circle back to compersion, it's like compersion happens when people feel included, not when they feel excluded.
And they feel emotionally not taken for granted. They feel safe. They feel centered. Right?
Exactly.
And if your wife is leaving the room, you can't expect her to feel very compersive or compersion about the three-way that you're having with the person who just demonstrated to your wife that she doesn't give a shit about how your wife might feel. These are high-stakes things to say to somebody who is already married to somebody else.
Yep, agreed.
All right, one more question.
Hey, Dan. I'm a early 30s straight woman, and I just broke up with my boyfriend like 2 days ago, and on the struggle bus. I guess I don't really have a question so much as validation or maybe some advice on like breakup stuff. Validation part is that I've been somewhat poly under duress. Basically, we were poly, but I kind of knew the whole time that I couldn't handle it, but I was really trying because I really loved him and continue to love him. And so it's really painful that it was just like fundamental incompatibility. That's the problem, not like the connection. So it's really sad because, yeah, we felt feelings for each other. But I thought a lot about poly under duress or relationship structure things being adjacent to sexual orientation where either like you are or you aren't. And it took me 3 years to like admit to myself that I am not poly. I guess the further validation that I'm looking for is that monogamy is a reasonable ask. I think I was kind of like inundated with rationales for poly and openness or whatever form of openness for so long that I've like gotten into this mindset that it's unrealistic of me to ever like want that or like expect that. So I don't know. What's your take? Do you think that's a fruitless hope, desire? I mean, I know a shit ton of people do it, but also a shit ton of people get cheated on.
All right. When we talk about polyamory, when we talk about compersion, there's often this language that gets attached to it about evolving into polyamory, evolving into being able to experience compersion as if it's a higher state, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is not true. And I don't think that that helps the cause of polyamory or open relationships when we kind of back into this place where we're shaming people who want monogamy. And in this case, a woman who wants monogamy, gave polyamory a try, and now knows really this thing that she tried isn't for her. That language, that rhetoric, I'm, more highly evolved. How do we talk about the fact that most of us do evolve into polyamory? Most people who are polyamorous were monogamous. So there is a kind of evolution without making people who can't evolve in that particular way feel as if they're damaged somehow.
Right. I mean, I would use the analogy of someone who wants kids versus someone who doesn't. One is not better than the other, one is not more evolved, and you have to figure out what is it that you want and find a partner that will match that. Because if you're trying to go into a relationship with two different visions, it's going to not work. It's going to be a lot of suffering, even though there's a good connection, for sure.
And there must have been a good connection here because they were together for 3 years. She was willing to give polyamory a try. I'm sure you know, as I know, so many people who were reluctantly open at first because it was basically an ultimatum issued and they agreed to it quite reluctantly to save the relationship. And then a year or two in realized that they were happier now. What had been imposed on them actually made them happier. The imposition still felt maybe perhaps a bit of a violation. I've compared it to somebody, you're with somebody, they buy a house and they didn't tell you that they were going to do that and they didn't let you see the house. That's a shitty thing to do. You don't buy a house to live in with your partner without your partner's participation, consent, buy-in. But then sometimes you got to go look at the house and make an independent judgment, setting aside the feeling of betrayal about whether that's a house you would want to live in. And some people, the house gets bought and they're mad that the house got bought and they realize I love this house. Those are the people who become no longer poly under duress, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a thing that happens. The caller gave it a try. It didn't work for the caller. There was something there. Monogamy. Where do you come down on it? Can monogamous relationships work?
Oh my
God. Is it a
God.
fine thing to want?
There's a lot of people out there who want monogamy, and that's okay. Yeah, like they can definitely have a long monogamous life together. And
most people want monogamy.
Yeah.
But most people have been told that monogamy is what they're supposed to want.
Right. And that's what's cool about this caller is she now knows she wants monogamy from a conscious place, not from a default place.
Oh, that's really, really smart. Yeah, totally. Because she was willing maybe because this person meant so much to her, give non-monogamy or polyamory a try.
Mm-hmm.
And now she knows she's not just, in the default setting of monogamous relationships, monogamous expectations, that it is a conscious choice, that she, in her future relationships, will choose monogamy rather than just assume it.
Right. And people can always change over time. Like some people want monogamy in their 20s and their 30s, and then they, become empty nesters later, and they all of a sudden decide they want to open things up. And it's okay to give yourself that kind of flexibility and fluidity, but be okay with what you want now.
Do you think that's there is something about non-monogamy in the context of a relationship that's 10, 20 years in. Maybe you have kids, you have a very comfortable life together. You have this stability and familiarity and security. There's just this sense of this person isn't going anywhere. And the capacity in that established relationship to absorb a little of the chaos of dating and fucking around with other people, that maybe at the beginning of the relationship and sex is chaos. And one of the things I think people in long-term relationships miss sometimes is the chaos and drama of new experiences and variety. I sometimes get in trouble because I'll say to people, I think it's a good sign when a couple is monogamous for years before opening up, because they get to that place of stability where their relationship is strong enough to absorb that chaos that's just built in. But others disagree. I'm curious where you come down on that. I just, in my observations, the relationships that were monogamous for a while before opening up are more stable as open relationships when they do open up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, some people just know from the beginning they're going to be poly, and that's okay for them, and that works. But I think the majority of people who have successful poly relationships come from monogamy, just also because we live in a mononormative society, and most people just assume monogamy from the beginning. And yeah, it gives people a chance to really get on the same team on many levels. And I mean, it's a double-edged sword because also it can be hard to break up patterns when people have been monogamous for so long and then they have to relearn a whole new paradigm. There's definitely some challenges there, but typically they're less willing to kind of throw everything away.
Dr. Marie Thouin, Compersion scholar, also dating and relationship coach. Check out her website, whatiscompersion.com. Follow her on Instagram, as I do now, at love_insight_dating. Dr. Thouin, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.